Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the book that I read for my book club last month, which is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. It was actually my turn to host, so I like to come up with 4 or 5 different books and then have my book club members vote. And this is the one that we voted on reading. And I put it on the list because I had been seeing it make the rounds on Book Talk. So I actually now realize that even though the book came out in 1995, it has regained a lot of popularity in the past few years because of Book Talk. So little interesting side note. For this video, I think I'll describe a bit of the premise and then my thoughts. And I'm actually very surprised with what this book turned out to be because I feel like from the marketing and from its popularity on social media, I was expecting something that was going to be kind of a mind blast and like very shocking, or to have some kind of twist that made, which is why it would like have a resurgence in popularity. And I also feel like from the marketing and maybe from the title, I also thought it was going to be pretty feminist and kind of Margaret Atwood style, like Handmaid's Tale type of vibes. And actually it's neither. And so if those were kind of your preconceived notions, I would recommend checking it out just to see how those preconceived notions will be turned on their head. So to give you the premise, essentially, you have a group of women and one girl who are locked in this cage underground, and they have no windows, they cannot see the outside world, they can never leave the cage, and they're provided all of their necessities through, a little trapdoor, and there are these male guards that watch them day and night. There's artificial lighting, and no one knows why they're there, and no one knows what has happened in the outside world, and no one knows why they're being held there. Essentially, it's a huge mystery, and they are stuck there until one day they are, by total chance, able to flee. And then the rest of the book talks about their escape, many years after that, how they live through that, and honestly, the deaths of a lot of these women after they've escaped and what comes next for, in particular, our protagonist, who is the one child who is with all these other women. And the difference between the girl is that she doesn't have any memories of before times, whereas a lot of these other women, they remember their husbands or their children. Then they feel like they've been drugged or something that has created this haziness in their memories, but they still have the memories of what their life used to be like, whereas this young girl was in the cage maybe through an admin error, maybe through a mistake, and that's the only life she's ever known. I thought the discussion with my book club was really interesting. We talked about a lot of different topics that the novel raises. So, for example, the overall feeling of the book is quite suspended, I would say, if that makes sense. You really don't get a lot in terms of strong bursts of action. I don't know, it's hard to describe because a lot of things do happen and there are strong emotions, but still the overall tone and sense of the writing is almost like being in a sensory deprivation tank, because in the cage, obviously, they're kept in this very like sterile and artificial environment. And even the rest of the novel, you're never really given like a big reveal, or even though certain things kind of slowly progress, the point of the book is not to, climax in terms of the plot, which I thought was kind of refreshing, and it wasn't disappointing or frustrating as a reader. I think sometimes as a reader you'll read something and you'll kind of be haunted or like tortured throughout the whole book trying to figure out like, why are they there? What is the reason? Like, are we ever going to find out? But I feel like you never have that expectation, and so then you're kind of just along for the ride and it doesn't really bother you. And I think that kind of overall environment or reading experience is very hard to curate or to craft, and so I find that to be very unique and special about this book. Another thing we talked about as our book club are kind of these ideas of, what it means to have a community, what it meant for this girl to kind of be separate from the rest of the women just in terms of her experience. And I thought maybe because she didn't have those memories of a previous life, she was much more able to kind of forge her own path. She was the one who always wanted to keep exploring the planet, try and figure things out. She was younger than everyone else, so she had a lot of energy, and she definitely was able to think differently and to have a very independent mindset, where a lot of the other women, A, were not too smart according to our protagonists, but B, were kind of just harping and really unable to get over their loss of their past lives. So that contrast between the girl and the rest of the women, I think, led to us discussing in book club kind of what it means to create your own happiness and what it means to be in a community versus striking out on your own. And then finally, I think a conclusion we came to in book club is that it's not really a feminist text. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I feel like a lot of the reflections or ideas that it spurred in us applied to men and women alike. And it was kind of cool to have a group of women be representative of the human experience, because I feel like usually, and for so long, it always falls to like a male protagonist or a group of men to be representative of humanity. And the fact that, the guy in our book club and the rest of us felt that these were very human experiences or ideas or reflections that we were having was cool, because it came from following a group of women and from following a female protagonist and main character. And the kind of lessons that we were drawing or thinking about were universal. So that actually was a pleasant surprise, because things like Handmaid's Tale, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's just a little bit much. Like, it just makes me like pretty sad and depressed that, I don't know, I feel like the work has a lot of value in opening up people's eyes and also being a great creative work. But it's a bit heavy, and I do like that this wasn't that. This wasn't like an overtly like women are being oppressed and now I have to read 100 pages about how women are totally devalued and stripped of their power. Instead, it wasn't that at all, which I as a reader just really preferred to read, and so that was a better reading experience, I think. It's a very meditative book, I think. It's contemplative. It's not one where you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe that ending. Or even in book club, I thought it would be fun to try and figure out, like, is it post-apocalyptic? Are they on another planet? You kind of get hints that it might be another planet. And this is referred to as sci-fi, which I find so interesting, because I don't know how genres work in terms of publishing and marketing, but I don't know that I would really call this science fiction. Like, there's like a hint that they're on a different type of planet, like they're not on Earth. But other than that, there's no really like sci-fi elements to it. So I think that was so interesting that this is referred to as science fiction. But one really cool thing that happens is, because they don't really have a good reference to what time of day it is or other markers of kind of figuring out where they are. Also, like, once they finally do escape the cage, they don't really recognize the terrain. They don't really like, the weather is not what they're used to. That's kind of why they think they're on a different planet. The girl figures out how to come up with her own system where she counts her heartbeats and then uses that as a unit of time to figure out like distances and how long it might take for them to do certain tasks, because they do end up building like their own little village or a few different cabins, and they do try to kind of create a community for part of the book. So that whole idea of what it means to be in a society following, sunset, sunrise, and having hours and minutes and seconds as units of time, versus in this book where our intrepid protagonist just kind of created it on her own with what she had available to herself, which was literally counting her heartbeats, was a really interesting idea. One last interesting idea that I'll comment on is the power of storytelling. And so the main girl, because she has never experienced any type of entertainment, so she figures out how to tell stories to herself. And sometimes they're so vivid that it results in like a little explosion. And a lot of the stories are about this young male guard who I think she finds attractive. And so actually my book club really took that in a sexual way, as she was kind of like getting herself worked up. But I interpreted interpreted it more as just kind of the power of storytelling, and when you don't have access to any type of creative inputs or outputs or any type of like stimulus, her ability to just, because she kind of doesn't get along with the other women either, her ability to just sit in the cage and tell herself stories, I thought was an interesting thing to include, and kind of is a nod to the power of storytelling and the importance of the imagination and of her imagination. So those are just some of my thoughts on I Who Have Never Known Men. I don't really know why that is the title of the book. It is true that they never really interact with men, but I think that the title is a bit of a red herring, because it's really not. I think maybe, this is what we discuss in book club, maybe the title is I Who Have Never Known Men in the sense that men refers to society. So like I who have never like lived in society, I feel like is more what the title means, rather than man as in like I'm a woman that's been in a cage and I really want to be with men. So that's just something to consider. I would love to hear your interpretation if you've read the book, because I really didn't find it to be an overtly feminist text. I actually felt like it was really about the overall human experience as told through women, which I thought was really cool. It is worth noting that the author is Belgian and the original text is in French, and so maybe it's a translation thing as well. So if anyone's read the original, I would definitely love to hear from you. But let me know if you read this and what your thoughts are. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. And until the next one, I hope you guys are reading a lot and keeping well and keeping safe. See ya!